So here we are. Welcome to the dopamine slaughterhouse, better known as dating apps, where your thumb is more intimately acquainted with strangers than your actual heart is. Isn't it adorable? We spend hours swiping faces we'll never touch, hoping for that rush, that pixelated affirmation that, yes, you're still marketable meat. Here's your hook, your blood-red meat for thought. Modern dating apps might just be the sleekest form of psychological self-harm we've ever invented. But hey, at least the UI is cute. You start out bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You download one dating app, or all of them, because if you're going to commodify your soul, might as well diversify the platforms that auction it off. You craft your profile with the neurotic finesse of a medieval monk illuminating a manuscript. Favourite activities? Hiking, even though the last time you touched nature was when you accidentally killed that succulent. Food pics, but only aesthetically tragic ramen bowls. A blurry festival photo, proof you once left your house. Then comes the bio, looking for someone who can make me laugh. Congratulations, you've just joined 93% of all bios. That should narrow it down nicely. You hit save. Your digital avatar is born, ready to be judged and hopefully validated. And it is, at first, ding, a match. Ding, another one. Your brain lights up like a Vegas slot machine. Each notification is a confetti cannon aimed directly at your hypothalamus. This is fun. This is thrilling. This is proof of desirability. Gift wrapped in pings and hearts. But it's also a contract with your own attention span. And guess who's always defaulting on the payments? And what about your poor, battered brain chemicals? Let's get a little neurobiological, shall we? Don't worry, we'll keep it darkly charming. Dopamine, your old frenemy. It's the molecule of anticipation, not satisfaction. Meaning it's the reason you keep swiping. Keep checking, keep hoping. Every potential match is a Schrodinger's cat of romance. They could be your soulmate or another mouth-breathing basement philosopher who believes crypto is a personality. Either way, your dopamine surges at the mere possibility, and then it crashes. Hard. Because novelty doesn't equal nourishment. You're chasing a high that was designed by teams of behavioural scientists whose literal job is to keep you addicted. Dr. Anna Lembke, psychiatrist and author of Dopamine Nation, puts it bluntly. We've transformed the world from a place of scarcity to a place of overwhelming abundance. But our brains are still wired for scarcity, not for the dopamine overload we now live in. Translation: your brain is a caveman, rummaging through a molecular buffet it was never designed to handle. Let's talk about choice, or why your soulmate is probably stuck in your outbox. Psychologist Barry Schwartz called it the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the less satisfied we become. That's because abundance breeds anxiety, not contentment. Dating apps promise us an infinite candy aisle of potential lovers. But if you've ever stood paralysed in front of 48 flavours of ice cream, you know the dark truth. More isn't better. It's overwhelming. It fosters a constant fear that a tastier flavour is just one more swipe away. This is why so many of us engage in what I like to call dating app hoarding. You match, you chat, you ghost. You keep profiles alive like emotional insurance policies. What if the next person is hotter, wittier, less into astrology? And so you stall. You bench people. You become a commitment phobe by design, trained by the app's architecture to treat people like perishable goods on a digital shelf. And meanwhile, your own self-worth gets tangled up in the sheer volume of possibilities. Because if you're not getting matches today, it must mean something is wrong with you. Not, say, the algorithm or the weather or that half the user base has already rage deleted the app for the 6th time this month. And ghosting. That's just a polite way of saying, I didn't sign up for emotional labour. Ghosting's basically the hit and run of modern romance. And if we're being honest, most people don't ghost out of cruelty. They ghost because continuing requires emotional energy they simply don't have. Or because ghosting is, ironically, the etiquette approved by the culture of endless options. As philosopher Alain de Botton quipped, one of the privileges of modern love is not needing to explain oneself. Translation: you don't owe closure when humans are treated like disposable profiles. But of course, that means you also don't get closure. And your poor frontal cortex, craving narrative resolution, like a junkie for tidy stories, suffers for it. Let's sprinkle in a little evolutionary psychology, just to keep the existential dread spicy. Our ancestors lived in tight-knit tribes of 150 or fewer. Your dating pool was basically the people in your campfire circle. So if you found someone with a full set of teeth and who didn't throw rocks at your head, jackpot. Now, you have literal thousands of options, each filtered by proximity and arbitrary metrics like must-love dogs. Your brain, forged in Pleistocene reality, is forced to process a social world it never evolved for. This is why app dating can feel both intoxicating and vaguely nauseating. Because you're basically a caveman with a smartphone, overwhelmed by choice, terrified of commitment, and overstimulated by novelty. But let's not forget the bright side. Because yes, there is one. Sort of. Dating apps do work. Statistically, more couples than ever meet online. Your friend's friend who married her Hinge match is not a unicorn. They're the new normal. In fact, according to a Stanford study, online dating is now the most common way heterosexual couples meet. So the apps aren't inherently evil. They're just tools. Unfortunately, they're tools built by profit-driven companies who understand human weaknesses better than we do. Their business model relies on you staying on the app, not finding love and deleting it. This is why design for love is a myth. Apps are designed for engagement, and engagement often means dangling just enough hope to keep you swiping, matching, and reinstalling every time you delete in a fit of frustration. Which leads us to our final, slightly horrifying observation. Modern dating apps might be the sleekest form of psychological self-harm we've ever invented. Why? Because we walk in willingly. We know we'll be judged, rejected, breadcrumbed, ghosted. We know we'll compulsively check for matches and then be disappointed. We know we'll start to see ourselves as inventory, as one face in a sea of faces. Yet we come back. Because somewhere between the dopamine spikes, the fear of being alone, and the algorithm's uncanny knack for timing your notifications, we're hooked. And so we swipe and swipe and swipe, until we're emotionally exhausted, but still vaguely hopeful. Because maybe, just maybe, the next swipe is the one. So here's your final snack of savage optimism. If dating apps are a dopamine slaughterhouse, at least we're all stumbling through it together. Everyone's insecure. Everyone's terrified. Everyone's just trying to be loved, or at least liked enough to keep loneliness at bay for another Saturday night. In the meantime, protect your heart like it's the last known copy of a priceless manuscript. Log off when it starts to feel like work. Text your friends instead. Read a weird philosophy book. Stare at the ceiling and wonder why Nietzsche never had Tinder. Hint, probably would have swiped left on humanity. Because your value isn't measured by how many strangers decide your face is worth their thumb's labour. And love, if you're into that sort of masochistic gamble, still tends to show up in the most analogue, inconvenient, unexpectedly human ways. Now let's drag in the scientists to ruin the party. Because nothing pairs with your already fraying sense of romantic optimism quite like cold, empirical data, confirming that yes, you're probably as messed up as you suspect. Jean Twenge, psychologist, generational doom prophet, and author of iGen, has spent years studying the psychological fallout of living life through screens. Her findings: people glued to dating apps report substantially higher rates of depression and anxiety. Twenge doesn't mince words. There's no historical precedent for this kind of spike. Translation: congrats. You're living in the first generation to statistically date itself into an emotional pit. Hope you brought marshmallows to roast over the smouldering wreckage of collective mental health. It gets even juicier, and by juicier we mean more existentially horrifying. A 2020 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that compulsive dating app use is linked to surprise, lower self-esteem, and more loneliness. Not exactly a shocker when your daily ritual involves putting your face on a virtual meat market and begging for a stranger's swipe of approval. Because that's what we're really doing, right? Standing in a digital coliseum. Thumb up or down, our very worth dependent on whether someone finds our carefully curated collage of selfies, witty prompts, and accidental travel photos compelling enough to warrant a pixelated nod. It's not just your heartbreak playlist or that bottle of red wine whispering sweet nihilisms in your ear that's making you feel hollow. It's the entire gamified slot machine of validation. From people who vanish before you can even mispronounce their last name. But it's just harmless fun. The last words before your frontal cortex checks out. We like to believe we're smarter than the machines, that we're savvy consumers of digital romance, ironically swiping with our friends over drinks, treating the whole endeavour like a game. But here's the kicker. It is a game. By design. Just not one you're likely to win. Dating apps are constructed on the same principles that keep gamblers glued to slot machines in Reno at 3 a.m. Random rewards, variable schedules, bright colours, tantalising sounds. This is called intermittent reinforcement. You don't get a payoff every time, so your brain becomes hyper-attentive, addicted to the possibility of payoff. B.F. Skinner, the father of operant conditioning, discovered long before Tinder that lab rats pressed a lever obsessively when they received food pellets on a variable schedule. Press once, nothing. Press again, jackpot. Sound familiar? Now swap the pellet for a match notification. Guess what? You're the rat. Imagine telling someone from the 1800s that future humans would voluntarily spend hours each day tapping a glass rectangle, hoping for digital approval from strangers, experiencing euphoria when it comes, spiraling when it doesn't. All so they might eventually bump genitals with one of them. They'd probably back away slowly, whisper a prayer, and tell you to lay off the opium. But scientists today aren't shocked, because your brain is a predictably needy sack of meat. MRI studies show that getting a match on a dating app activates the ventral striatum, your reward centre, the same neural circuitry that lights up when you win money or eat chocolate. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, that lovely part responsible for long-term planning and rational thought, gets temporarily sidelined. Which is why it's so easy to keep swiping even when you're already exhausted, or to keep chatting with someone who gave you a grand total of 3 monosyllabic responses. Your primal brain is hunting novelty. It doesn't care about your future wedding, or even your future breakfast. And in case you thought it was just happenstance that dating apps are so sticky, let's dispel that illusion with a little peek behind the algorithmic curtain. Most dating apps use ELO ratings, yes, borrowed from chess rankings, to determine your desirability score, pairing you with people in roughly the same range of swipe appeal. If you get a lot of likes, your score goes up, and vice versa. but they also intentionally withhold matches to keep you coming back. Just like a casino, they carefully pace your wins and losses. It's not purely social chance. It's a finely tuned psychological ploy. A 2019 expose in Fast Company uncovered how some dating apps run desirability delay tactics. Meaning, if you're swiping in the hopes of an instant ego boost, the algorithm might purposefully postpone showing your profile to people who'd swipe right. Why? Because your desperation increases engagement. You come back, swipe more, check obsessively. In other words, you're not searching for love. You're a hamster incentivized to spin the wheel. What happens then to your poor psyche under all this lab conditioning? Repeatedly subjecting yourself to micro-assessments of your worth has consequences. Twenge's data isn't alone. A study in computers and human behaviour found that Tinder users reported lower levels of self-worth, body satisfaction, and psychological well-being than non-users. And that's before we even get to comparison culture. Scrolling through profile after profile of people seemingly more attractive, more interesting, more spontaneously snapped on top of Machu Picchu, your own life starts to look aggressively beige. Social comparison is a natural cognitive process, but it's supercharged by dating apps. You're not just comparing yourself to neighbours or classmates anymore. You're measuring your appeal against thousands of curated highlight reels. That's like trying to feel good about your backyard BBQ when the neighbour's throwing an Ibiza foam party every night. Have you heard the term swipe fatigue? Well, it is measurable, literally. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychology analysed dating app users and found that the repetitive, high-frequency decision-making required by swiping causes cognitive overload and emotional depletion. This explains why after an hour on dating apps, your brain feels like it's been wrung out like a dirty sponge. You're making dozens of micro-decisions in rapid succession. Yes, no, maybe. Wait, are they cute or is it just the sunglasses? What's that quote in their bio? Deep or pretentious? Oh God, a fish pic. Abort. Each tiny judgment taxes your executive function. Over time, this makes you more irritable, more cynical, and ironically, less capable of the kind of nuanced emotional engagement that might actually lead to love. So here we are, surrounded by more potential partners than at any point in human history, and yet lonelier than ever. Psychologist Julianne Holt-Lundstad's extensive meta-analyses show that chronic loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It increases your risk of death by 26%. Now throw in an app that constantly dangles potential connection just out of reach, conditions you to treat humans like trading cards, and reinforces the idea that you are only as worthy as your last swipe. It's a cocktail for chronic dissatisfaction, or as one particularly bleak user on Reddit put it, dating apps make me feel like a ghost haunting my own love life. But don't panic. Well, maybe just a little. If you're feeling personally victimized by this avalanche of research, take heart. It means you're still self-aware enough to question whether being a lab rat for Big Swipe is truly the life you want. Because scientists also point out that intentional, mindful use of dating apps changes the outcome. People who treat apps like a tool rather than a dopamine buffet report far less emotional fallout. They set time limits, swipe with clear standards, and log off before it becomes a masochistic ritual. It's only when apps morph from utility to entertainment, from means to end, that we start to circle the psychological drain. So how about trying your grandma's method? In other words, maybe the only real hack is to make your approach look a little more archaic, slow, selective, infuriatingly analog. Instead of chasing every notification like a lab rat after a sugar pellet, you pause, you swipe less, you actually meet people in person. where algorithms can't decide your destiny. Ironically, the more offline your search for love, the more you avoid the engineered manipulation that's tanking so many people's mental health. Twenge herself suggests this isn't about fleeing tech entirely, but about becoming smarter than the machine. Be conscious of what you're doing. Don't just mindlessly swipe. And now, because we promise to be forward-thinking, and you're obviously a masochist for still reading this, let's peek ahead. With advances in AI companionship, VR dating, and even neurostimulation devices that can simulate falling in love, we might soon look back on the crude swipe economy as quaint. A digital stone age where humans still had to awkwardly DM each other instead of plugging into a headset and letting algorithms pair their brainwaves directly. Will that solve the existential ache, or simply give us new ways to commodify connection, new metrics by which to measure our inadequacies? Probably both, because if history shows anything, it's that humans are wonderfully inventive at turning the promise of intimacy into yet another vector for anxiety. So where does that leave you, dear dopamine-soaked lab rat? Hopefully a little more aware, a little more skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, a little more willing to treat your brain like the tender, overstimulated organ it is. Next time you find yourself 3 hours deep into a swipe spiral, heart racing with each match notification, remember, your limbic system is doing exactly what it was wired to do. Your frontal cortex might want to intervene. And the scientists, they're nodding solemnly from the lab window, jotting down notes on how profoundly weird it is to watch a species simultaneously starve and gorge on human connection. There's actually a term now, swipe fatigue. It's like battle fatigue, except the only trench you're in is your bed, under a pile of unwashed laundry, scrolling through profiles while your brain quietly leaks serotonin. Your phone's blue light bathes your face like some divine judgment, illuminating every pore and insecurity. Congratulations, your nightly ritual is basically a sad pagan ceremony to the gods of validation. And spoiler, they rarely answer. Neuroscientist Dr. Anna Lemke, author of Dopamine Nation, has spent years dissecting exactly why we keep chasing digital highs, even when they leave us emptier than that leftover sushi you're absolutely going to regret at 2 a.m. She says, we're all running from pain. The problem is that when we chase pleasure to escape it, we often end up worse off. Apply that to dating apps and it's painfully clear. We swipe to escape loneliness, boredom, existential dread. But more often than not, we spiral back into those same feelings, now wearing a slightly more humiliating outfit. Because dating apps promise endless delight. A buffet of hot strangers, witty banter, giddy matches. In reality, they're a conveyor belt of micro-rejections, ghostings and disappointments that flatten your emotional resilience like a cartoon anvil. So what exactly is swipe fatigue? It's a cocktail of emotional burnout, cognitive overload, and the sneaking suspicion that your soulmate is probably out there, but tragically trapped on page 4 of your Likes You tab, buried under a pile of shirtless gym bros and inexplicably shirtless men holding fish. Swipe fatigue means your brain is tired of the novelty loop. The bright, shiny faces blur together. Your reactions dull. You become less curious, less engaged, less empathetic. A 2021 study in Frontiers in Psychology laid it bare. Heavy dating app users reported higher levels of mental exhaustion, irritability, and cynicism toward potential partners. The more you swipe, the more your brain short-circuits, literally depleted by the sheer volume of micro-decisions. Think about it. Every swipe is a tiny judgment. Yes, no, maybe. No, hell no. Okay, but only if he gets a haircut. Oh dear God, is that a live snake? Multiply that by hundreds, and your poor prefrontal cortex is basically begging for a nap. Neuroscience 101, your feel-good chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, aren't bottomless. Your brain can't just keep pumping out pleasure on demand. That's why after an hour of swiping, the app feels more like a chore than a thrill. Dr. Lemke describes it as the pain-pleasure seesaw. Every time you flood your brain with dopamine, it eventually tips back toward pain to maintain balance. That's why after a night of heavy swiping, you don't wake up with a romantic glow. You often feel emptier, more anxious, vaguely disgusted with humanity. And of course, you tell yourself, well, maybe tomorrow I'll meet someone better. Because your dopamine pathways are still whispering sweet lies, so you pick up the phone again. And the cycle repeats. Each left swipe on you is a tiny ding to your ego. Even if you are not consciously aware of it, each non-response to your carefully crafted opening line is a little invisible bruise. It all adds up. Because humans weren't designed to be evaluated by strangers at scale. Your ancestors didn't stand in a field getting thumbs up or down from 500 other villagers before someone decided, sure, I'll mate with that awkward biped. Your brain still processes these as social rejections, which, fun fact, activate the same neural pathways as physical pain. That's why when you're ghosted or ignored, it can feel like a gut punch. Your brain literally treats it as an injury. Swipe fatigue isn't just about volume, it's also about the unique brand of cold indifference that dating apps normalise. Ghosting has become so common, it's basically an accepted rite of passage. And it's devastating in a very specific way. It leaves your brain spinning without closure. Your amygdala goes into hyperdrive. Your frontal cortex tries to logic its way through the void, replaying every message to find what went wrong. Dr. Guy Winch, author of Emotional First Aid, notes that the lack of explanation forces your mind to concoct worst-case scenarios. When we don't get closure, we become even more self-critical, because our mind would rather blame ourselves than tolerate ambiguity. So instead of concluding that maybe they just weren't feeling it, or were abducted by aliens, which honestly would be more polite, your brain whispers, it's you. You're too needy, too boring, not hot enough, not fun enough. Add that to your pile of unwashed laundry and existential dread. So why does your brain keep buying the ticket to ride? Because it's still wired for hope. Your ancient neural hardware is designed to keep you seeking social bonds, even crappy, inconsistent ones. That's why intermittent rewards, the occasional thrilling match or hot flirt, keep you hooked far more powerfully than constant ones. Slot machines didn't become a billion-dollar industry by always paying out. They became rich by paying out sometimes, enough to keep you pulling the lever. Dating apps work exactly the same way. Your rare good conversations, those are jackpots engineered to keep you chasing the next win. And the paradox? More swipes, less connection. Swipe fatigue doesn't just exhaust you. It actually rewires your approach to intimacy. You become more judgmental, quicker to dismiss, less patient. The paradox is that having endless options makes you less likely to invest deeply in anyone. A study in computers in human behaviour found that people who frequently use dating apps were more likely to practice relationship shopping. They approached dating like browsing Amazon, quick assessments, zero commitment, always a better deal around the corner. So even when you meet someone genuinely interesting, swipe fatigue can sabotage your patience to let things unfold. You're trained to seek the dopamine rush of new, not the oxytocin stability of bonded. So, is the answer just to delete everything? Not necessarily. Dr. Lemke, another psychologist who spend their days picking through our digital entrails, emphasise moderation and intentionality over total abstinence. Dating apps are tools. The problem is how we use them. If you treat them like an emotional slot machine, you'll ride the same burnout spiral as everyone else. If you use them with clear boundaries, short sessions, strict standards, prioritizing actual dates over endless chatting, you can avoid the worst effects. Think of it like sugar. A little is fun, a lot rots your teeth and eventually your soul. Because here's the forward-looking kicker. Swipe fatigue isn't going anywhere. If anything, the next wave of tech is about to supercharge it. Imagine AI-driven dating coaches optimizing your profile in real time. Neurofeedback helmets that literally spike your dopamine when you match. VR dates so immersive your brain won't be sure if it's met someone or just hallucinated them. Sounds thrilling? Sure. Also sounds like new and exciting ways to burn out your emotional circuitry even faster. Because as long as tech companies profit from your engagement, not your happiness, the incentive will always be to keep you swiping, hoping, crashing, repeating. So what's left? Maybe the smallest, quietest act of defiance is to slow the hell down. Swipe with intention, not boredom. Give real humans time to unfold instead of assuming you can assess soul compatibility from 3 photos and a quote about tacos. Recognize that being perpetually available for micro-dopamine hits comes at a cost to your deeper emotional reserves. And if you're already swipe fatigued, take a break. Log off. Read a bizarre novel. Call that friend you've been neglecting. Walk aimlessly until you accidentally rediscover what unstructured, analog pleasure feels like. Because here's the real brutal truth of swipe fatigue. It doesn't just drain your hope about finding love. It starts to bleed into how you see yourself. You stop believing you're interesting enough to warrant curiosity or patient enough to deserve a slow burn. So yes, love, swipe fatigue is very real. It's not just your imagination. It's not just because you're too sensitive or overthinking it. It's the inevitable outcome of subjecting your poor, bewildered nervous system to an endless parade of micro-hopes and micro-rejections. The best trick you can play on this machine? Remember that you're not just a consumer in the romance economy. You're a whole universe of stories, oddities, neuroses, dreams, far too expansive to be distilled into a profile card and judged by the idle flick of a stranger's thumb. Ever matched with someone, exchange 5 fiery texts that made your frontal cortex do a little jig, and then, poof, they vanish like a magician's assistant who got tired of living inside your illusions? Yeah, we all have. It's basically a rite of passage on dating apps, like getting your first overpriced cocktail that tastes like melted cough drops, or realising you'd rather spend Saturday night spooning your anxiety. Ghosting isn't just rude, it's neurologically brutal. Turns out ghosting actually lights up the same brain regions as physical pain. Research out of the University of Michigan used fMRI scans to show that social rejection activates your brain's pain matrix, the same areas that flare up when you stub your toe or accidentally slam your finger in the fridge door while reaching for last night's shame pizza. So every time someone ghosts you, it's like stubbing your toe on the bed frame of your self-worth. Except you can't hop around cursing until it fades. It lingers. Your mind tries to solve it, demands closure, digs for answers that aren't there. So your frontal cortex becomes an unpaid detective. Because here's what's extra evil. Ghosting leaves an information vacuum. Your brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It would rather invent horror stories than accept uncertainty. So you replay the texts, you analyse emojis, you speculate about whether they were abducted by aliens, decided to become a monk, or simply realised you misuse semicolons. Dr. Guy Winch calls this ambiguous loss. It's the psychological torment of an ending without explanation, harder to process than even blunt rejection. At least when someone says, "Hey, I'm not feeling this," your brain can file it away under painful but resolved. Ghosting. That's a cliffhanger. And humans are notoriously bad at living inside cliffhangers. But hey, plot twist, you're probably a ghost too. It's so easy to play the tragic victim of ghosting, the fragile empath, wounded by cruel digital cowboys riding off into the algorithmic sunset. But statistically, you've almost certainly ghosted someone yourself, because on dating apps, empathy is optional, kind of like adding guac, costs extra. And most of us just don't want to pay. It's a byproduct of scale. When you're fielding dozens of matches, each with their own small talk, each vying for your attention, your humanity starts to fracture. You become a curator of interactions, pruning conversations without ceremony. You stop replying, thinking they'll get the hint. Congratulations, you've become the ghost you fear. Ghosting is the signature heartbreak of our swipe economy, because dating apps breed disposability. They teach us people are abundant, interchangeable, recyclable. Why expend the emotional labour of a polite letdown when you can just fade out and open another chat? In the old days, by which we mean 1998, ignoring someone meant ducking their calls on your landline and pretending to be busy washing your hair. Now it's so frictionless it barely registers as cruelty, a simple lack of response, an unceremonious drop into the void. A 2018 study in Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that ghosting's now so common, nearly 80% of singles have experienced it, and over 70% admit to doing it themselves. Basically, we're all haunting each other's screens. It's a mutual poltergeist pact. So why does it hurt so much when it happens to you? Because your brain still thinks you're living in a tiny hunter-gatherer tribe where social bonds are literally tied to survival. Getting ignored back then wasn't just awkward. It could mean exile, isolation, and death. That's why your amygdala flips out over unanswered texts. Your evolutionary wiring doesn't care that you have Uber Eats and Netflix to dull the sting. It still treats rejection as a 5-alarm threat. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex tries to play therapist. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe they lost their phone. Maybe they're in a coma. But your limbic system isn't buying it. It's too busy sending cortisol floods through your body, like a chemical air raid. And ghosting feels personal, even when it's not. Here's the cruel irony. Most ghosting is about them, not you. People ghost because they're anxious, conflict avoidant, emotionally immature, or simply overwhelmed by the sheer buffet of options. It's rarely about some hidden defect you failed to disguise on your profile. But it doesn't matter. It still feels like a referendum on your worth. Because ghosting is silent. It leaves space for your insecurities to fill in the blanks with your worst fears. The ghost in the machine isn't just poetic, it's literal. Philosophers and tech theorists like Gilbert Ryle use the phrase ghost in the machine to critique the idea of a mind trapped inside a mechanical body. But dating apps have given it new life, because we are literally haunting machines now. Your unclosed chats, your unanswered messages, your left swipes, all digital echoes of unfinished connections. Every app is filled with dormant profiles, dead conversations, half-remembered flirtations, like a neon graveyard of might-have-beens. The algorithms keep pushing these spectres forward, hoping maybe you'll match again. Maybe you'll revive something that already died. It's romantic necromancy, disguised as convenience. So who's really ghosting who? If we're honest, we're ghosting ourselves too, because every time we choose the easy fade out over honesty, we train our empathy to shrink. Every time we let another unanswered match dangle, we dull our sense of other people's humanity. It's safer, of course. Vulnerability costs. Ghosting is free. But there's a hidden price. Your own capacity for intimacy erodes. You start expecting everyone to vanish, so you invest less. You armour up, You become a participant in your own emotional starvation. Future dating will only multiply these hauntings. Because here's the chilling, forward-looking bit. Ghosting isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's evolving. AI-driven dating platforms are being tested right now that can handle your small talk for you. Imagine your digital ghost chatting with someone else's digital ghost while both of you binge watch something else. Future, you might even set your AI to autopilot. Swipe on profiles with dogs, say something witty about travel, disappear after 3 days, which means the next wave of ghosting won't even be you. It'll be your algorithmic shadow, drifting off because your dopamine profile decided someone else was 2.3% more exciting. But maybe there's a tiny rebellion here too. You could decide to ghost less, to send the awkward, "Hey, I don't think this is a match, but I wish you the best," even if it makes your stomach twist. To offer people the dignity of closure, so they don't have to interrogate their worth at 3 a.m. under their own pile of unwashed laundry. You could also learn to accept ghosting with a kind of bleak grace, because it really is more about them than you. Most people are just fumbling around with the same insecurities, hoping to dodge discomfort. That's the ultimate irony of ghosting. We all hurt each other while trying not to be hurt ourselves. The ghost in the machine is you, and me, and them. We are all haunting this digital labyrinth together, flickering in and out of each other's lives, half hoping to be chosen, half ready to vanish the second it gets complicated. So next time someone disappears mid-conversation, remember, it's not your cue to spiral into self-loathing. It's just a predictable glitch in a system designed for easy exits. A system where empathy costs extra and most people prefer to skip the upcharge. But if you want something different, be different. Offer honesty instead of silence. Be the one who says, "Hey, I don't feel a spark, but I appreciate the conversation." It's awkward. It's vulnerable. It's also the only way to stop being a ghost long enough to be human. Because at the end of the day, the ghost in the machine only has power if you keep playing its game. Step outside the pattern, even slightly, and you're already haunting the algorithm instead of letting it haunt you. If you think dating apps exist to help you find love, that's like believing casinos are there to make you rich. Sure, someone occasionally hits the jackpot. They get their fairy tale montage, posed engagement shots in a sun-dappled meadow. But for the overwhelming majority, you're the sucker feeding the machine, bleeding quarters for the illusion that your big win is just one more pull away. Because here's the core truth that most slick app marketing will never tattoo across your forehead. Dating apps are built on engagement, not happy endings. Love isn't profitable. Hope is. Think about it. If everyone found their soulmate on Tinder by next Thursday, what would happen? The whole house of cards collapses. No more endless hours spent swiping. No more bio tweaks. No more anxiety-fueled reactivations at 1 a.m. because maybe my person is out there tonight. No more eyes on screens. No more ad impressions. No more money flowing into someone else's yacht fund. So the entire system is designed meticulously, brilliantly, to keep you horny enough to stay curious and anxious enough to keep coming back. More swiping means more time in-app. More time means more chances to show you sponsored content, to upsell you on super likes, boosts, gold subscriptions. You become a self-sustaining hamster wheel of monetized loneliness. Ever wonder why dating apps send you a "someone likes you" nudge right around when people typically feel the loneliest, like late Sunday nights or after holidays? It's not an accident. It's an algorithm trained on decades of behavioral data, predicting precisely when your emotional defenses are lowest. Your vulnerability isn't a bug in the system. It is the system. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han put it in the Burnout Society, the society of positivity is the society of self-exploitation. Translation: you're the worker, the product, and the addict all rolled into one, dressed up in brunch photos, holding craft cocktails, trying to look effortlessly desirable. You labour to keep your profile fresh. You mine your best photos, hone your opening lines, study prompts like you're cramming for a final in flirtatious anthropology. Meanwhile, the apps monetize your hope. They sell your time to advertisers, your data to analysts, your heartbreaks to an endless feedback loop that gets smarter and richer with every swipe. Every market thrives on your belief that happiness is always just one purchase, or in this case, one swipe away. So dating apps feed you an illusion of infinite options, thousands of profiles, each a tantalizing potential upgrade over the last. Never mind that studies show people can only seriously consider about 4 to 6 options before their brains short-circuit, or that too many choices actually lead to paralysis and regret, a phenomenon psychologists call the paradox of choice. Because for the platforms, overwhelmed is better than fulfilled. Anxious indecision keeps you scrolling. Satisfied people close the app. So, you're stuck in an attention economy casino. Dating apps borrow heavily from casino psychology. The infinite scroll is your spinning roulette wheel. The swipe sound is your jackpot chime. The match animation is your payout. Intermittent reinforcement, where you sometimes get a reward, is the most addictive behavioural pattern ever discovered. It's why lab rats press a lever until they pass out if the treat comes unpredictably. Humans aren't so different. The variable rewards of matching keep you hooked, even when most swipes lead nowhere. You're neurologically wired to crave that uncertain payoff. And dating apps exploit it with ruthless precision. You swipe partly out of sexual curiosity. Who doesn't like eye candy? But you also swipe because you're worried. What if your person is right there and you miss them? What if tonight's the night the stars align and you finally find someone to break the cycle of one-sided, hey, convos and vanishings? They push notifications with tiny dopamine teasers. You have a new like waiting. Someone thinks you're hot. There are 37 singles near you right now. Each ping is a little anxiety bomb dressed up as promise. Your pulse quickens. You open the app. Engagement goes up. Advertisers smile. Even your loneliness is monetized. Because here's the real dystopian kicker. The very emotions that keep you glued to your phone, your insecurity, your fear of being alone, your desperation for connection, are data points that get harvested, sold, and fed back into smarter algorithms to keep you exactly where they want you. Lonely people spend more. Lonely people engage longer. Lonely people are less discerning. So while you think you are just innocently browsing for love, your behavioural profile is being refined by unseen machine learning models to predict precisely how to keep you on the hook. Want a peek into tomorrow? Companies are already testing biometric dating algorithms. Wear a wristband that tracks your pulse or a headset that maps your brainwaves, and the system will show you profiles that literally make your heart race. Sounds romantic. Also sounds like a magnificent way to turn your unconscious vulnerabilities into premium ad inventory. Imagine an app that notices your dopamine spike at a certain type of smile, then charges you extra to see more people with that exact smile. Now, your deepest, most unspoken attractions are products to be sold back to you. Because capitalism doesn't just want your money, it wants your limbic system. Underneath it all, capitalism also sells the idea that love is something you can hustle for. Like a side gig. Work harder on your body, your photos, your brand. Buy the teeth whitening. Buy the tailored blazer. Buy the app upgrade. It's your fault you're still single, right? If only you optimize yourself more ruthlessly, the algorithm would reward you. As Byung-Chul Han argues, We've moved from a society of external oppression to one of internalized pressure. Exploiting oneself is more efficient than exploiting others, because it comes with the feeling of freedom. You are your own taskmaster, logging hours into perfecting your dating resume, while the platforms quietly rake in profit from your endless optimization. So is it all hopeless? Should we just throw our phones into the sea? Not necessarily, but awareness is your tiny revolution. Recognize that dating apps are designed to keep you on edge. They thrive on your feeling slightly incomplete. Use them, sure, but on your own terms. Set time limits. Swipe for fun, not validation. And remember, your worth isn't pegged to an algorithm's hidden desirability score. If you meet someone, great. If not, your life is still whole. You're not a half person waiting to be completed by a super-like. Because here's the sneaky truth. Capitalism needs you to feel perpetually unfinished. The minute you believe you are enough as you are, that your life can be full, meaningful, even joyful without a +1, the whole shaky business model starts to wobble. A content person doesn't compulsively swipe. A confident person doesn't chase every fleeting match. A self-fulfilled person doesn't invest countless hours trying to engineer the perfect digital self. So paradoxically, the healthiest thing you can do in this landscape might be to get a little bored, close the apps, let your anxiety subside, find worth in your messy, uncurated reality. Because while capitalism might want you horny and anxious, your soul probably just wants a quiet evening, a book, maybe an actual human connection that isn't mediated by a $1 trillion ad tech industry. So next time you catch yourself doom-scrolling profiles under the covers at midnight, ask, am I genuinely looking for connection right now, or am I just feeding the machine? Who benefits from my attention? Would I still open this app if it didn't promise the next micro hit of validation? Because the moment you start interrogating the system, the spell cracks, even if only slightly. And that's a tiny act of rebellion capitalism can't easily monetize. By now, algorithms know your type better than you do. They've studied you in ways that would make your mother weep and your therapist salivate. They know how long you hover on a blonde smile versus a tattooed smirk. They clock your micro-hesitations on profiles with dogs versus cats. They've mapped your heart rate, your gaze fixation, your dwell time. Facial symmetry, noted. Height preferences, tracked. Whether you're secretly drawn to people with slightly crooked noses or killer collarbones, that's been fed into some machine learning model before you even consciously realised it. Every swipe you make, right, left, hesitant, accidental, gets devoured by an algorithm starving for patterns. It learns that you like people who quote Vonnegut, or who vacation in Iceland, or who use semicolons properly, which is how you know they're either dangerously pretentious or marriage material. It cross-references you with millions of others, building probabilistic models of who you might fancy next. Not out of charity, but because the more accurately it predicts your desires, the longer you'll stay on the app, chasing the next perfectly calibrated dopamine hit. But here's the sinister bit. Studies by psychologists like Eli Finkel from Northwestern University have torched the comforting myth that algorithms lead to better relationships. In fact, Finkel's extensive research on algorithm-based matchmaking concluded that these systems mostly fuel illusions of compatibility. They rely on surface data, shared interests, similar demographics, broad personality questionnaires that can't possibly capture the depth of real human messiness. His research team summarised it with brutal clarity. No compelling evidence suggests that romantic algorithm-based matching leads to better relationship outcomes than meeting through other means. So basically, all these sophisticated systems exist primarily to look scientific, to dazzle you with a sense of engineered destiny. Because if you think the app has unlocked some cosmic compatibility secret, you'll keep trusting it with your heart, and more importantly, your time and data. Because let's be honest, compatibility isn't some static formula you can plug into a server farm. Two people who both love the Smiths might still want to strangle each other over dish duties. Two introverts might find their quiet nights turn stale and suffocating. Two thrill seekers might spiral into mutual destruction. True love, or even functional companionship, is less about statistical alignment and more about weird, unpredictable alchemy. Timing, vulnerability, shared growth. All things an app can't neatly quantify. But algorithms sell the dream that your soulmate is just a data set away. Because that's far more comforting and marketable than accepting that love is often a chaotic, stumbling accident. So basically, we're all participants in a giant, gamified experiment. Your love life has been turned into a lab simulation, only the rats are hotter and have Instagram handles. Instead of running through mazes for cheese, we're dodging emotional landmines and breadcrumb ghosters, hoping the next door leads to a happy ending. And the scientists in this scenario, they're engineers, product managers, data analysts, people whose primary concern is engagement metrics, not your eventual 40th anniversary dance to At Last. Here's where it gets creepier. Modern apps use deep learning neural nets that grow eerily good at predicting what kind of face will light up your brain's reward circuits. Some new platforms even test hundreds of images on you passively. They slip them into your swipe feed, measure tiny changes in your scroll speed, facial micro-expressions. Yes, if you've ever given camera permissions, that's on the table. And even pupil dilation, if you've paired with biometric gear. And because your brain is a sucker for subtle visual cues, eye distance, jaw shape, skin tone, the system learns to serve you faces that keep you hooked, even if you can't articulate why. It's not magic, it's just thousands of hidden correlations you'll never consciously understand. The algorithm knows, and it profits from keeping you entranced. Does this hyper-tailored matching actually help? Not really. A 2019 study in computers and human behaviour found that while algorithmic sorting could increase perceived satisfaction initially, because everything feels thrillingly tailored, it didn't actually lead to more stable or longer relationships. In fact, people often became more picky, believing the algorithm's fine-tuning meant their perfect partner was out there, so they'd keep swiping instead of investing in building something with the imperfectly wonderful human right in front of them. It's the paradox of optimized romance. The closer tech gets to modeling your taste, the more you start expecting perfection, and the more disappointed you'll be by the reality of flawed, gloriously complicated human beings. Want to get truly existential? The person you think you want may not even be your authentic desire. It's partly manufactured by what the system keeps showing you. You develop crush templates based on frequency and familiarity. You think you just naturally prefer guys with motorcycles or girls with nose rings. Maybe. Or maybe the app learned those hold your gaze an extra 0.6 seconds, and so it doubled down, shaping your preferences by feeding them back to you in a self-reinforcing loop. By the time you say, "That's just my type," who's to say it wasn't partly installed by the same tech that profits from your obsession? So love, actually, is an algorithm, but not in the way you think. Not because it's effective, but because it's become the medium through which you experience desire, attraction, disappointment, and hope. The app shapes your encounters, curates your possibilities, nudges your heart to beat for faces chosen by a probability matrix. You're still the one falling in love, or lust, or confusion, but inside a controlled terrarium, a digital Eden where every serpent, apple, and fleeting promise was placed there by design. So what's next? Soon, predictive AIs won't just guess who you'll find hot. They'll also scan your old chats, measure sentiment shifts, and suggest when to send that flirty follow-up or ghost. Some are already testing automated conversation starters, your algorithm talking to theirs while you both sip iced lattes in blissful ignorance. Imagine a future where two machine-learned versions of you build rapport before you even get involved. By the time you pick up the phone, the groundwork's been laid by digital ghosts, leaving you to figure out if there's any genuine spark or just the echo of data-driven puppetry. But here's the delicious, maddening, human truth. Algorithms can feed you faces. They can guess your superficial triggers. They can nudge you toward people who statistically look like good bets. But they still can't replicate the moment someone laughs at your weird joke in a way that feels like lightning under your ribs, or the awkward shiver when your hands brush at a cafe table, or the quiet moment you realise you'd rather stay up talking to them than sleep. No algorithm fully owns the mysteries that happen after the match. That raw, chaotic chemical swirl is still deliciously analogue. And what do you do with all this? Maybe nothing. Maybe just knowing that your heart's being herded by machine learning lets you take it a little less seriously. You can flirt, match, explore. But stay conscious that the perfect match myth is mostly marketing. And maybe also give yourself permission to meet people offline in unpredictable, beautifully uncurated ways. Because there's a kind of magic in the randomness that no server farm can replicate. So yeah, Love Actually is an algorithm, but it's still your messy human spirit that decides to show up, to risk it, to try anyway. Because despite all the engineered illusions, all the behavioural nudges, all the sophisticated matchmaking code, you're still the wild card they can't perfectly predict. And in a world that wants to turn your heart into a neatly monetized metric, maybe that's your last tiny rebellion. So, why are we still here? Here's your paradox wrapped in a savage little bow. We keep swiping because hope is addictive, even if the outcomes aren't. We're junkies for possibility. The next face, the next match, the next witty OMG same moment that briefly lights up your dopamine-starved brain like a sad little neon sign, even if it rarely goes anywhere, even if it mostly leads to ghost towns, awkward unmatches, or conversations that die out like cheap lighters in the wind, because for a fleeting second it might. And we're willing to suffer 1,000 disappointments for the chance that the next swipe is different. The French had something bleak and sexy to say about it. French philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, "Man is equally incapable of seeing the nothingness from which he emerges, and the infinity in which he is engulfed." Apply that to dating apps, and it's a kind of darkly romantic indictment of our habits. We'd rather drown in endless potential, the infinite scroll, the limitless maybe, than sit quietly with the nothingness, the empty inbox, the echo of our own company. It's easier to chase illusions of connection than to reckon with loneliness head-on. Or worse, to confront the gnawing suspicion that even finding someone won't cure the deeper hollowness we've been dodging. So we build cathedrals out of profiles. We decorate them with flattering angles, pithy quotes, travel photos that suggest we're adventurous, sophisticated, a little mysterious. We swipe through other people's cathedrals, half hoping to spot something divine in their stained glass, some spark that makes our hearts stutter. And every once in a while we do. A match, a conversation that blooms, a mutual fascination. It's intoxicating, even if it only lasts a day. Because for those few hours you're not alone. You're part of a shimmering story that might still be written. But more often it fizzles. They stop replying, you lose interest. Life gets in the way. So you log back in, swipe again, and the wheel turns. Because hope is a sly little dealer. It doesn't care how many times you've been burned. It only whispers, maybe this time. This is what makes dating apps so brilliantly, tragically effective. They don't just promise love, they promise hope. Hope that your loneliness is temporary. Hope that your story still holds an undiscovered chapter. Hope that you're still desirable. That out there, someone is waiting to unlock everything soft and secret inside you. It's a powerful narcotic, one that works even when the empirical data says your chances are laughably low. Because humans have never been rational creatures. We are emotional gamblers, playing our hearts like dice against the indifferent cosmos. We'd rather chase infinity than stare down nothing. That's the core of it, isn't it? We'd rather scroll through 1,000 possibilities, most doomed, some clearly terrible, than sit with the silence of no one waiting for us. Because silence forces us to face ourselves. It asks uncomfortable questions. Are you enough on your own? Do you know who you are outside of being chosen or desired? Can you live richly without someone to text goodnight? Most of us would rather keep swiping than find out. So why are we still here? Because swiping is easier than vulnerability, easier than risking real-world awkwardness, easier than rejection face-to-face, which stings far worse than an ignored message ever could. Apps give you a buffer, a safe zone where you can fantasize, perform, and withdraw at will, where you can project dreams onto strangers without having to engage in the slow, often messy work of building actual intimacy. The digital buffet is always full, never satisfying. Dating apps give us an illusion of abundance. Thousands of profiles at your fingertips. A feast that never ends. But abundance without depth is just a distraction. You can fill your plate endlessly and still starve for meaning. Because more choice doesn't equal more connection. In fact, as countless studies on the paradox of choice have shown, it often leads to more regret, more superficiality, and more emotional fatigue. Swipe culture trains us to believe the next option will be better, so we never fully commit to the one right in front of us. Which means even if we do find something promising, part of us is still scanning the horizon, wondering, could there be someone even better? We're not just dating people, we're dating possibility. It's not love we're most addicted to, it's potential. The idea that your next great romance might be just one profile away is more thrilling than the reality of navigating someone else's messy humanity. The messy humanity that comes with bad habits, weird family baggage, mornings where their breath could kill a small rodent. Apps let you live perpetually in the honeymoon phase, chasing spark after spark, without ever enduring the uncomfortable work required to let something real take root. So keep swiping. Because honestly, you probably will. You'll keep coming back, like the rest of us. Because the alternative, stepping away, risking missing out, feels unbearable. So swipe on, match, unmatch, ghost, get ghosted, repeat. But at least do it with eyes open. Knowing that the real match you might be making isn't with some charming stranger in Santorini. It's with burnout itself. The ultimate irony is that the more we chase connection, the more disconnected we feel. Because swiping offers so many micro-interactions that none of them carry enough weight to sustain us. We're left overstimulated but undernourished. Like someone living on candy, jittery, momentarily high, and ultimately hollow. So why are we still here? Because we're human. Because hope springs eternal, even when it should probably take a nap. Because some part of us, hopelessly romantic, hopelessly irrational, still believes that love is out there, just waiting to be unlocked by the right pixelated face. Better to keep your thumb busy, your mind hopeful, your heart ever tilting toward maybe. Because maybe is safer than nothing. maybe is more fun than accepting there are no guarantees. Maybe is what keeps our species bumbling forward, despite thousands of years of heartbreak and poetry written about exactly this sort of longing. But maybe, just maybe, the smallest act of rebellion is to know all this and keep your heart open anyway. Not to the app, not to the algorithm, not to the next curated stranger, but to yourself, to the possibility that you are enough, loved or alone, matched or unmatched, swiping or still. Because if you can find contentment there, you've already won a game they were never expecting you to figure out.